Roberts, America's Most Loved Pet Health Coach. Hope you are well. And I know we've got several questions on the Facebook group, so let me jump over there. And Karen, great to hear that that she got a lot of gradu out of the ears. And this kind of thing where they put a 2-week treatment, I think works really well. What you do want to do is once that 2 weeks is up, go back, get his ears checked. Make sure that your vet can see the eardrum and that it is indeed intact. Because unfortunately, some of these guys, the eardrum will rupture and it will stay open, and that can create some long-term problems. If the eardrum is open, sometimes what I had to do was actually sedate these guys and then flush the ear under anesthesia to completely clean out the middle ear, and then use medications that would be safer to use for an open eardrum. And then a lot of these guys, we could get them to finally heal up. And I would say about 10 to 15% of these guys, once the eardrum ruptures, it will be kind of semi-permeable, for lack of a better description. It kind of pops in and out. So really not a fun situation, but glad you were getting some good info from your vet. Jennifer, I think we talked about Facebook practice, and you just got to start. And May is feeling your pain and working her way through it as well. So I think that's your yeah, and that's the thing with multiple cats, it gets interesting. So you just kind of got to put it down and hopefully, we used to have to run shotgun with the spray gun. When we had 5 cats, we had one cat that was just really excited about eating everybody else's food. Catherine is asking about Cytopoint, and here's what I think about it, Catherine, and I think we'd like to vilify it quite a bit. Out of all of the options out there, it was the one that created the least amount of problems, in my opinion. And I hate to resort to it, but sometimes we just have to. So I could not find any super negative issues about this particular drug. The downside is that if you have to use it on a monthly basis every 6 weeks, the dogs can develop an antibody to the medication itself, because again, it's a genetically engineered medication that is designed to inhibit the production of a specific interleukin. Is that a mouthful? That creates the itching. And I think it does give you some time to a little deeper. You've already been to a dermatologist, and I think this is what they've offered. If the ease product is not helping that much, it's tough. And to be fair, I think this is where, regardless of how you approach it, getting skin issues under control is extremely difficult. So I would consider it, and then hopefully set you off in a different direction. If you all remember, some months ago, I did a Facebook, actually, I think it was the Ipet's Ultimate broadcast. Good to see you, Susan. And what I was talking about was the fact that early spay and neuter may actually be responsible for much of the chronic disease that we're seeing currently. And this happens because there is no feedback to the production of gonadotropin releasing hormone. So to make this make a little more sense, in the intact pet and in us, before menopause and andropause, hypothalamus produces gonadotropin releasing hormone, tells the anterior pituitary to produce luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, which are needed for both male and female mammals to make them sexually healthy and viable and able to reproduce. When pets are spayed and neutered, essentially we remove the ovaries and testes, which would normally create a feedback loop to shut off production of gonadotropin releasing hormone. So when there's sufficient testosterone or sufficient estrogen in the bloodstream, then this loop is shut off. But when pets are spayed, it isn't. And so what happens is there's something like 20 to 30 times the amount of luteinizing hormone in circulation. And unfortunately, tissues that shouldn't really be impacted by this hormone develop boatloads of receptors. And it's in the skin, it's in the brain, it's in the joints, it's in the bowels, it's in the adrenal glands, it's in the kidneys, and it's on the lymphocytes. So this is a mechanism that probably is why we're seeing so much chronic disease in our pets. Now, there is a veterinarian that was teaching, and still is teaching other veterinarians how to do testosterone replacement therapy. And he did this initially for pets that were debilitated um, because of old age and arthritis and that sort of stuff. But what he was finding was that it made them feel a boatload better, and a lot of other health issues went away as well. So part of it is that testosterone, and I believe he's using injections, is a positive feedback to shut off the production of luteinizing hormone. So let me see if I can find that link while I'm talking a little bit more about this. But this is one proposed treatment, and it is the other option that's out there is treating. There we go, dogtosterone. There it is, dogtosterone. So one other option would be to use something like an anti-gonadotropin hormone. So excuse me, let me pop you over to this page. So here's the dogsterone page. And so this is kind of what this veterinarian has been recommending. And I think it's not unreasonable because it solves several issues at one go. The other thing would be to use veterelin, which I think May had brought up some months ago. And that's kind of what started me down this path. Unfortunately, is not licensed for use in the United States except for ferrets. But but you can buy a nifty dog food, dry food that's lower in carbohydrates, which is kind of silly, but there you go. So let's hop back over here. So Catherine, this might be something to pursue and talk with your veterinarian about. It's a little fringe, but I think this makes sense. And for dogs that have skin conditions that just are unrelenting and we can't figure them out, this may be the option to help solve it. Let's see, so that's it. I think, oops, that's the wrong cheat sheet. And then I'm not sure who's asking about PEA or Palmitoyl ethanolamide, mouthful to say. I did talk about this maybe a year or so ago. And so the idea is that it's supposed to help limit painful conditions or reset the body's receptors so that pain is not so perceived. And what I found was that it wasn't that effective. And I had several clients that tried it and just really were not super thrilled with it. There was one client that did think it was effective. For humans, the dose would be 1,200 milligrams. And so for a 50-pound dog, I think 500 to 600 milligrams per day. And then for smaller breed dogs, I would say something like probably 200, 250 milligrams. I don't think there are any side effects other than potentially GI ones as far as vomiting, diarrhea, but but I really unfortunately just did not see it be terribly efficacious. So that's what I can tell you about PEA. I think a better option would be to use things like T relief. So if you're not familiar with that, it is an arnica based supplement. And it's more of a homeopathic approach to pain relief, but it has been extremely helpful for many people. Um, let's see, tea relief for dogs. So there's a veterinary version and a human version. So you can get the pet version on Amazon, of course. Um, but I think has been very effective. And because it's an arnica-based supplement, it has no side effects essentially. The other thing you could consider would be, again, Assisi Loops or Assisi pads. And the other thing you could consider as well, if you've gone through all my usual suspects, is seraflazyme, which is a an enzymatic approach to pain relief. Again, you can hit this on Amazon. The situation where you would not want to use this is if the dog is born cruciate, because it breaks down fibrin, and that's part of how we end up reducing the discomfort and pain by improving mobility. So for most pets, so this is a 5 milligram tablet, you could give a full tablet for a 50-pound dog at least once a day, probably twice a day. The other trick is that because this is an enzyme, you do have to give it away from food. So that's another thing I've kind of got in my back pocket. But this may be really helpful for you too. And I think that's what we've got for this evening. Susan, are you and your critters doing okay? And here's the tea relief link as well. Good. If you've got more questions, pop 'em up. And let's see, let me check on Facebook, make sure there's nobody posting questions over there, because they don't show up for some reason on Restream. And nope, looks like we're good. Okay, so that's what I've got for you today. Okay, good to hear you're good now. Your crisis is smoothed out a little bit. So I'll see you next week. Until then, give everybody a big hug